Good afternoon, everyone, and once again, thank you so much for joining us today for the third and final webinar in this series. Today, we are excited to have Stuart Brookes from PaperCut here to talk to you all. Stuart is the Head of Channel and Alliances, EMEA at PaperCut, and he's going to be taking us through best practice on PaperCut products to help you use them more effectively and help you save money. Having talked to Stuart prior to this webinar, I think you'll find this talk may show that some of you may not be using their products to their fullest advantage, so I'm sure you'll all be getting something out of it. As always, there'll be a Q&A session at the end of Stuart's talk, and if any of you want to ask a question, then please feel free to use the chat boxes to post them up, and we'll try to get through as many as we can at the end. Welcome, Stuart. It's great to have you here today, and thanks for taking the time out to speak to our members. And I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a pleasant day, and very much appreciate you taking the time out to listen to myself and PaperCut today and what we're going to talk about. So without further ado, move on. I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to discuss today. So for those that don't know PaperCut, well, just a tiny bit, just on who we are, where we're from, what we've done. We're going to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing in the wider marketplace, generally in print, UK focus, but also an EMEA focus as well. We'll talk about education pain points that we see. There's opportunity at the end for feedback, which we would absolutely love. Validating what we think we see against what you actually see is liquid gold for us. And then we'll touch a little bit on some best practice tips and quick wins that are available there for you with your PaperCut system before we finish up with Q&A for the day. So moving on, a little bit about us, PaperCut. We're an Australian company, 24, 25 years old now as an organisation, global organisation. I'm based down in Bracknell, near Reading in the UK, head up Europe, Middle East and Africa. We've also got offices over on the west coast of the States, and as I say, headquartered in Melbourne, down in Australia, with satellite offices as well. When we look at PaperCut and where we are, nearly 100,000 customers, we're proud to say. We were very much born out of the education space. Our CEO and one of our founders worked in a high school as a sysadmin, and saw the pain, saw an opportunity, and built a solution that education was our bread and butter, and it has really helped us develop and move to where we are today. So as I say, 100,000 customers across 195 countries, and the product itself is translated into 33 languages. If you're in the UK, that includes Welsh. If you're in Spain, that includes Spanish, Catalan and Basque. So again, full global product as well. 100 million users. And overall, we're managing over 8.5 million devices. So that's installed on MFDs, but also then printers that we manage natively. And we talk about Chromebooks as well. We're the market leader when it comes to print integration with Chromebooks. So over 10 million Chromebooks have a PaperCut extension installed on them. And again, Chromebooks are obviously key and prevalent and growing in the education space globally as well as the UK. So as I say, we're going to talk to you about some of the trends that we're seeing on a wider level globally, and really what's driving those as we move forward. So it's been an interesting few years, I think, is probably the best way to position this. We've seen major technological shifts, global recessions, chip shortages have driven hardware shortages, as well as that thing called the global pandemic along the way. The global pandemic itself, the drive to hybrid working, certainly drove a shift to cloud, whether that be cloud only organizations, cloud first organizations. And we see that certainly represented as well in the education space. The emergence of IoT technology, the move to digital workflows, all of these things coming together changed the print landscape quite significantly. I have a 19-year-old daughter. She doesn't print. When I talk to her about print, she looks at me as if I'm coming from a different planet. So organizations like PaperCut and the industry were having to adapt to that technological shift and that generational change that comes with it as well. Obviously, global economic conditions have driven, reduced hardware units, reduced print volumes, and also brought different challenges to yourselves when it comes to how you manage print and queues and drivers and devices in at one point in a hybrid workforce when schools were remote, but also generally just the change in technology and makes your job more complicated as well. Chip shortages brought us significant issues. We see end users, you're extending you're extending leases, extending copy agreements, making more and sweating those assets more effectively. So all of these issues, as I say, shift to cloud, supply chain, economic conditions, social political issues in other parts of Europe, hybrid working, make it a really difficult time to assess trends. Things that we thought were trends tend to be more short-term issues. If we look at hybrid working, in some elements, hybrid working doesn't impact the education sector too much, is what we see and is what we hear. Other organizations are now wanting to move back to more office-based working. So again, the requirements of print change drastically based on where people are, what people are doing, and what those trends are. So it's a really interesting and difficult time to forecast from a print industry perspective at the moment. That said, there are certain clear areas that we're seeing. This is an IDC stat that I give. By 2024, average refresh cycle. So in other words, what we're seeing is that organizations, including education, are now looking to extend leases and extend agreements. Devices went unused and or underutilized during that global pandemic. It's a bit like a car that's been sat in the garage for months. There's miles left in the tank or miles left in the engine. And that changes to an extent then the nature of print management as people look to manage the value and understand how they can use products like PaperCut to help maximize the value that they can get from those lease agreements and manage those devices more effectively to really benefit from a cost perspective as they move forward. Without date, though, however, the shift to cloud has been significant. We, over the course of the last few months, ran a survey online looking at the shift to cloud, and it is definitely something we're seeing in an education space as well. Certainly in that primary, secondary space more so than any others. But the shift to cloud is prevalent. Again, the pandemic, I think, drove that as people had to look at different ways of solutions and how we manage print. But when we look at the whys, it's without doubt cost reduction. If we can remove our print servers or minimize our infrastructure, be that on-site Active Directory, for example, they're all significant costs that you as a school can make. Easier administration, I think I'll touch on this as we talk later, but as the demands on sysadmins within education become more and more and people need to do more with less or more with the same resource, easier administration and easier management becomes absolutely key moving forward. And again, people expect that easier administration as we transition to cloud. Elements like, as you can see other topics there, we talk about needing to reduce on-site servers. That reduces cost, again makes administration easier, and organizations are moving to cloud first or cloud preference or in some instances cloud only solutions as they move forward. Adherence to security policies. Again, organizations maybe from a safeguarding or a Prevent Act and a GDPR perspective, maybe want to minimize servers that are being kept on site. Inherently, you would expect servers to be more secure in a cloud environment than an on-prem. So it gives, again, less areas of attack or less surface areas for people to exploit and take advantage of. When we looked at why people were moving to the cloud, we then looked at what people were looking for from products like PaperCut. Opportunities to present today, to understand from yourselves, what you see, what you feel, what pain you feel are inherently valuable to PaperCut. We were at an event recently up in Manchester and London, and again, that value from talking to end users to understand pain points and opportunities is significant in helping us shape the direction of our product as we move forward. So when we, as I say, we completed this survey, we looked at where people were going. We then looked at what people wanted. And I think to an extent, some of the answers surprised us somewhat in that, yes, secure print release, find me printing, follow me printing, whichever term you're comfortable, stays there. But there certainly has been an increase in trend and transition to driver deployment and user setup. I think it's the bane of print drivers and print queues are probably the bane of most sysadmins' lives as they move forward. And that's certainly something we're hearing more and more of in the, as we enter a world of print enablement and just making things easy. It's how can I just allow it so a member of staff or a teacher or a faculty head can walk into the school, connect their device, any device, and just press Control P, print what they need to when they need to, without that need to be calling sysadmin or logging a call or a ticket somewhere needing help. Usage reporting, I think is a bit of a given. It's about understanding the control that we see. So we still see a lot of people going, I want to improve security. I need to make my printing easier, and I want that visibility and that control. And that's where the usage reporting comes in, the ability to track print or copy or scan and implement quotas. So those three tie up very nicely. But certainly has been the increase in document capture. That ability for a teacher to take a hard copy document and scan that into a system of choice or a cloud repository of choice and be able to digitize documents as we move forward. So it's good for PaperCut in the sense of validating our product direction and our roadmap direction and reaffirming what we see the market asking for, and therefore how that influences as we move forward, both with our on-prem product, but also as we move into cloud and our cloud products as well. One of certainly the major trends I think that we've seen, and again, industry research is out there to back it up, and very much in both education and non-education as well, is what I'm going to say is that the transition to A4. As organizations maybe move from, or schools move from decentralized fleets and having, one or two large devices in a reception and people having to walk and move between, that transition to A4 appears to be increasing. People move, as I say, from one or two devices into a more decentralized remit. And when we look at that, 90% of our print is A4. And I think a lot of people ask that question. If 90% of my print is A4 and 90% of the paper that I'm buying is A4 or letter, why am I buying A3 devices? When you look at the cost of a device, the footprint of a device. So as people realize that, I think that we're back into that cycle or that trend of maybe majoring or looking to move towards A4 and buying A3 in proportion where required. Similarly, as people look to drive down costs, suddenly an A4 mono printer that works as fast as an A3 color MFD, again, adds value, adds cost reduction, becomes a smaller footprint as well. In some instances, as hybrid working becomes a norm, as office space becomes smaller, or as within an education, as we look to maximize our teaching space and increase our classrooms, footprint becomes more valuable as we look at, where can we fit a classroom, where can we fit an IT room, where can we fit a music room, or where can we provide additional educational resources? How can we maximize our floor print and footprint to do that? And sometimes things like A3 to A4 can help with that process as well. And then obviously the lower cost of devices, the physical cost is the obvious element. An A4 MFD or an A4 high-speed printer is a more effective device at times cost-wise than an A3 device. So it's certainly something that we're doing, especially then when you've got products like PaperCut that can maybe help control the print volume. So whilst you may have more devices and you provide easier access to print by having more A4 devices than less A3, you can then use products like PaperCut to help control and mitigate that, to make sure that print then doesn't become an increasing cost within the business. So that talks an element of some of the high level trends that we're seeing, as I say, some in education, some outside of education, and certainly some crossover as we move forward. What we'll talk a bit now, some of the issues that, or some of the challenges, I should say, that we see in education specifically. As I said, education is our largest vertical. It's where we cut our teeth, for want of a better term, and a space that we're very proud of, and the feedback that we gather from the vertical is extremely important to us. So these are some of the feedbacks that we see and feedback that we get when we talk to end users as well. Control is always the case. As I said, I was at a recent UK education event up in the north of England, and still the overwhelming requirement is we need to cut our costs. We need to increase the level of control that we've got. You know, when you see schools talking about, you know, a copier cost of £1,000 for a quarterly bill, you know, and the amount of paper that people burn through, where PaperCut can help is to provide that control. You know, where we've got that lack of control over print is that driving cost. So if we can give that control and give that visibility of who prints what, why, and when, then it, you know, it really does address that challenge as well. And more importantly, you know, from a staff productivity perspective, you know, from a teacher productivity perspective, you know, none of us was teachers. You as teachers want to be standing in front of a device, filtering through pieces of paper, trying to find your print job. So again, that ability to just allow you to get to a device, release it, and walk quite quickly, is certainly a challenge we're looking to address, and continues to be a challenge in the market space. One of the notable, probably most notable pieces of feedback that I received from some recent conversations is the lack of, for want of a better term, feature usage of PaperCut MF. You know, without, you know, not exact numbers, but it very much feels like, you know, there's a 80% of customers use 20% of the product. So that adoption of print management is really key. A lot of that can stem from sometimes lack of product awareness and what the product can do, but also comes down to change management within an organization. You know, it's about making sure that we bring, you know, staff and teachers and pupils, whatever education sector we're in, along on that journey. Why are we bringing print management in as an organization? What are the benefits that print management will provide to us in terms of cost reduction, sustainability improvements, productivity enhancements, ease of print or ease of use of print for service users, be that staff or students? So I think that change management piece is certainly a high element to look at. Without a doubt, for those on this call that are, you know, from the sysadmin and IT admin fraternity, you know, you're being asked to do more every day. Sometimes, if you're lucky, with the same resource, sometimes with less resource. So certainly one of the key challenges that we've always had from day one in PaperCut is designing for a sysadmin. How can we make your role easier? You know, the last thing you want is to be taking phone calls, emails, knocks on a door about, oh, how do I print today? You know, my printer's jammed. I need to print to that one over there. How do I install the queue for this printer? So whether that be things like queue and driver management and print enablement, or, you know, print management and find me printing, you know, the more that we can do to make the IT burden reduced when it comes to print, the happier that we are as an organization. Security is an ever ongoing challenge, you know, be that GDPR safeguarding, that, you know, the UK Prevent Act, understanding who prints what, why, and when is important. You know, making sure that students are protected, you know, staff are protected effectively as well. We very much see that drive for security is key. So again, features like Find Me Printing, for example, you know, in cloud products, that ability to look at a keyword in a document title, continue to be challenges that the marketplace is looking at. One that affects all, be that primary, secondary, higher, further ed, is the proliferation of device types. You know, we've got Windows School, we've got schools that use Apple devices, we've got Google for Education, schools. We've got Mac OS, Chrome OS, Windows, a raft of tablets, an even wider raft of smartphones, and in a lower end, students want to print. Staff might want to print. In a university world, when it becomes BYOD, how do we enable that? So again, when we look at PaperCut's designed to make life easier for a sysadmin, it's very much, what doesn't matter what the operating server is or what that end user device is, we need to enable that world of BYOD, and again, allow people to just walk in and just perform the functions that they need to perform, whether that be print, whether that be copy, whether that be scan. Cost reduction, these are not in any order of sense, but without a doubt, cost reduction is paramount for all of us. Budgets are tightening, as schools, budget needs to be spent on areas that help staff productivity, help student productivity, can help bring funds back into, the education sector. So reducing print cost is valuable, and that budget can then go towards staff and student resources, which ultimately is what everyone is looking to do from that level. And then, lastly, certainly not leastly, actually, it is sustainability. Not just from a organizational or organizational level, not just from also a let's do right by the environment level, but also from a staff and student level. The workforce of tomorrow are climate aware. Personally speaking, I've got 3 kids, 19, 11, and 7, all through the different ages. I have a 7-year-old coming back to me, Daddy, we need to do, stop using single-use plastics. We need to make sure we switch our taps off. Daddy, we need to make sure that we use both sides of a piece of paper. So as generations become more and more engaged into climate change, again, it's a challenge that we need to address and we need to understand and fix as a collective moving forward too. So those are just some of the challenges that we think we see based on the feedback we get from our education conversations as we go out into the marketplace. Some of the comments, some of the the feedback is we look at it and go, how can we help for schools? So where's money going? We have no vision of who's printing what, no way to restrict printing and copying. Costs pile up, be that cost of paper, costs of toner and consumables, even down to small things like energy costs. That ability to track, as I say, who does what, when they do that, report on that, apply the policies and apply quotas, and they're things we'll talk on. They're ultimately benefits that will give you and your school insights and visibility of that print environment. And when you've got those insights, we can look to change that behavior toward more both earth and budget friendly habits. So again, cost reduction and sustainability, and making sure that we're driving through that market. When you maybe move on to higher education, again, similar costs and similar elements of there. Where are print costs coming from? The challenge we talk about of BYOD in a higher ed environment. As I say, students have got different devices, it's different operating systems, and they're paying student fees, and they expect to be able to come in and print easily. Again, challenges we've got to do. Managing those devices, managing those queues, again, becomes a headache. And in a world where, we're looking to do more with the same or more with less, it's imperative that we provide an environment that can do that. So whether you're looking at control, cost recovery, BYOD, supporting mobile printing, again, it's about taking control of that environment, ease the workload of our IT departments and enable our students and staff to print easily, independently, and make sure that productivity is there and that those user satisfaction levels are there, be that staff or be that students as well. So we'll touch a little bit on some of the best practices that sit within PaperCut. It's difficult to squash all of these into, and I don't overly want to do a sales pitch either. That's not what I'm here. So whether actually you're a PaperCut user or you use a different print management product, these are principles and practices that you can take forward and you can look at if you're not already doing. So we talk, and I've mentioned it a couple of times already, But one of the primary challenges in managing printing today is dealing with that task of providing print across a multitude of devices that are now available. So the BYOD, bring your own device term. Most of us have got a phone, we've got a laptop, we've got a tablet, and generally our preferred operating system. Personally, I'm presenting to you from a MacBook Pro. I've got my tablet in my bag, and I've got my iPhone in front of me. So again, there's elements of PaperCut, mobility print, and PaperCut Pocket, one of our cloud products, that focus on print enablement. And when we talk about print enablement, that's our goal, to make printing super easy to set up and use on all platforms and all devices. It doesn't necessarily look at the security aspect and the find me printing. It's more just, can we get this up nice and quick and provide a nice user experience? And also give that element that users can print over the internet from a Mac and a Windows and a Chromebook. So I can print as a student, I can print that device, walk into school, university, college, and that job's there ready for me. Again, as that teacher, I can do something the night before, submit it through, and it's there the next morning for me. Because what we do see is that ultimately the IT landscape has changed substantially over the last 10 years. More mobile devices than ever before. And when I put on previous hats in previous roles I did, we stood there 15 years ago talking to education customers and non-education customers, and you talk to people about mobile print and they looked at you with a funny look and wondered what you were talking about. Whereas now, again, there is an expectation to print not just from a computer, but to print from my smartphone, my iPad, my tablet, my Chromebook. I rarely print these days, but actually when I do, I'm generally printing off a tablet or a smartphone, not necessarily from a laptop. So again, as landscapes change, as user demands change, as generational change comes in, we have to adapt to those as we move forward. I think I'm right in saying this. Maybe not all the time. There are always cases, but generally gone are the days when pushing out a print driver via Windows group policy solves everybody's solution. As I said, today we're in a multi-OS, multi-device world, and it's important for PaperCut that we can meet those requirements. So whether we look at mobility print, which allows users to print with freedom and the simplicity of the devices that they've got and the way that those devices were meant for, whether we look at web print to manage the growing need for BYOD devices, wireless devices, and anonymous users, or even features like guest print, so somebody can walk into your school or your college and know that they can print, access to the Wi-Fi network and authentication, and then release a job. So again, making sure that we've got all of those and making sure therefore that you've got those services offered to staff and students increases the adoption, increases engagement, and therefore helps the uptake and the use of it, which again in turn is hopefully going to help us drive costs down within the education organisation. Certainly very much with the IT sysadmin in mind. I think at PaperCut we realise that cost reduction comes in many forms. Yes, it can come in the cost of less print, less toner, less paper, but also increasing productivity as a form of cost reduction. If we can enable people to work smarter, if we can enable IT organisations to get more from the same level or less resource even, then we can drive cost reduction and we can allow people to spend their time on areas that are going to generate a greater return. So as such, for us, trying to make life easy for a sysadmin is key. You don't want to spend your days bogged down, as I say, with how do I print, where's my nearest printer? And we've tried to solve that, make the world of drivers and queues just that little bit simpler for you. So for those that don't know, it's a standard feature within the product. So installing printers is simple if you've got one print queue on your home computer, but when you're in an education environment, you're on a managed network with lots of users, lots of printers potentially in that mix of operating systems in far-flung locations, maybe on a trust with different schools, you're in a college or a university with multiple campuses, things can get tricky. So as that sysadmin or that network administrator, it's important to make sure that you've got the best tools so that you can get the right print queue to the right person in the right location every single time. And that the printer deployment options that we've got make life easier both for sysadmins and end users alike. So again, if you're in the primary world and we're trying to make life easy for our teachers, maximize their student time, that's there. If we're in the higher end world where we've got both staff and students with print demands, again, the more that we can help you make them become self-service and self-serve, the more effective you're going to be allowed to be in other areas. Doesn't matter if your environment has got print servers or no print servers, if it's a mixed fleet or a printer. Feature we've got, PaperCut Print Deploy, allows you to push out those print queues across your network using a clone, configure, deploy approach. It is there to make sure, as it says there, right queue to the right person in the right location every single time. You can choose to deploy those printers automatically or optionally, again, down to user, down to location. So again, it's all about trying to make life easier for you as a network admin or as a sysadmin moving forward. Convenience, I think, again, as we move to that world of productivity in itself is a form of cost reduction. The convenience of print is key, so whether you call it pull print, push print, follow me print, secure print, whatever it may be, we call it find me printing. It is the most used feature within the product globally. For that ability for your staff or students to send their jobs to a single print queue from any device and release it from any device, again, removes that headache that you may have as a sysadmin of, what printer do I use? How do I print to that device? Where's my nearest printer? Again, the more we can remove and make our end user base self-serve, the easier and the happier everyone becomes. So where the users want to print to one print queue via a universal driver, or it's a universal print queue, again, whether they want A3 or A4, whether they want color or mono, simplex or duplex, that whole element is to just swipe and release and make life easier. From a sysadmin perspective, if we can limit you to one queue, maybe you've got two with a color and a mono, again, you can roll in a new printer and you don't need to worry about the queues and the drivers in the back end. And as I said, it helps with cost reduction. Industry stats will tell us that 1 in 7 pages, about 14% of documents go in the bin without ever being read. And again, maybe not so much, if you're using print management, not so much the case, but if you're not, how many times have we printed and we forgot a document, or we've gone to get it and somebody else has picked it up by accident and we've had to reprint it? So that ability to control that print process, make sure that staff or students aren't printing when they don't need to, again, is only going to help us drive down print volumes. And if we can drive down print volumes, there are savings there again in print and in paper. And the more we drive down our volumes, maybe the more we can also rationalize devices and drive down capital cost as well, or lease costs. Print policies is a complex world to go into, so I'm very much going to do it. Let's keep it simple. For those of you who we are very grateful are maybe existing PaperCut customers already, you will know there are lots of recipes, there are lots of scripts and lots of policies we can put in place. We can sit there and go, do you really want to print these 20 pages in color that's going to cost you X? If you're printing this 50-page document, it should go on that printer rather than this printer. But I think ultimately, if you bring it back to a level of simplicity when it comes to best practice, there are essentially two. One is print on both sides and encourage the printing on both sides. It's a great way to slash paper usage. So you start by configuring double-sided as that default option. And you can do that right now with or without PaperCut as well, by the way. So if you're not using PaperCut, you're not using print management, it's absolutely there within your print driver. You enable that, and that will drive down that paper usage. Then if you wanted to use Pocket or PaperCut, be that PaperCut Hive, Pocket MF, whichever product, you can actually use it to then remind users at the time of printing. So maybe if they've overridden it and they're printing in simplex or printing one-sided, you can remind them of the benefits of printing dual-side, whether that be environmental or cost benefits. Or you could actually just say, hey, PaperCut, convert them all to double-sided. We don't want to allow anybody to print simplex. We want to force things into double-sided. So that ability for duplex print is there with or without PaperCut, and absolutely is a best practice that we should be following. Color print, We know the cost of colored prints are much higher than mono. More expensive toners, inks, generally, devices as well. So again, with PaperCut, can use that print script, to help guide users to black and white. So again, you can apply, rules in place that maybe stop people printing in color full stop, that maybe stop them printing internet documents in color, for example. Again, or, more restrictive policies and go, actually, nobody's going to print in color. So maybe you create yourselves a color and a mono queue to make life easier. Or maybe you only deploy that color queue to a set number of users. But ultimately, if there are easy places to start, controlling color and controlling the simplex versus duplex is going to go a long way in cost reduction and sustainability and efficiency as we move forward together. Setting boundaries with print quotas and scheduling, again, pretty straightforward, but you can apply different figures, different numbers to students and staff. Make sure that people don't see printing as an endless commodity, as something that I can just go file print and print what I want, when I want, as much as I want. So again, simple things, apply those quotas. You can apply them to refresh. You can refresh them monthly. You could refresh them daily. The choice is there. But ultimately, again, it's about giving some control and making sure that we don't see things as a luxury. Again, so just another area to focus on as we move forward. Last but not least, as we get close to wrap up now, is the environmental aspect. And as I say, this is a best practice as we move forward as individuals with a responsibility to the planet and also future generations. So for those customers and prospects wanting to minimize environmental impact, we've always worked to reduce print waste. The name of the company says it ourselves, so whether that's reminders to customizable policies, ultimately the sustainability story has matured now. We've moved beyond waste reduction to actually helping organizations make positive environmental impact. We brought in PaperCut Grows, which is a forest positive printing program. And again, from recent education conferences, that has resonated, and it helps people to understand that actually we can print, but we can become forest positive as we do, and that helps, as I say, whether we're educating our children, whether we're staff looking to set examples, the environmental piece is key moving forward, I think, to all of us. So very much concludes what we were looking to present today. So just, again, as we remind you, we've looked at what we're seeing in terms of trends. It's a difficult time to assess trends with everything that's gone on in the last 3 years, but without doubt, we see a shift to cloud, and we are starting to see that shift from A3 to A4. We talk about the challenges we see in education when it comes to control, adoption, the challenges that you have as sysadmins, security, especially with cloud coming into play, BYOD, cost reduction and sustainability. And we like to think that, we're designing PaperCut for you as end users, for you as sysadmins, to really get the most of and move forward with. So on that note, as I shut my Brummie accent up and listen and hand over to yourselves, just as I'm sure you may have questions for us, we've definitely got questions for you that we'd love to understand what your pain points are around print and documents and related solutions in school. Do you sit there going, why on earth are PaperCut not looking at this or looking at that is going to help us drive forward? And understanding what we do well and what don't we do well. I think opportunities like this are few and far between and extremely valuable for us as an organization. So on that note, Chris, I will hand back over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stuart. That was very informative. And as with the other talks we've held this week, I'm no doubt that the recorded session will get a lot more viewings from anyone who couldn't make today's session. And all that remains now is to go through any questions we may have. I'll leave it up to Sean to post any he can see there. Here we go. We don't have print management right now. What sort of savings have you seen ballpark when implemented?
Great question, Alex. So very much, if you're that greenfield site, and again, I'm going to quote you sort of industry typical stats, but there are case studies on our website galore that will show this. Typically, you could be looking at anywhere in the region of 15 to 30%. And again, when I talk personal experience, I've seen up to 40s and 50s on greenfield sites. A lot will depend on what control have you got in your organization today. If staff and students are doing what they want, when they want, how they want, typically you're going to see the higher end of that figure. If maybe you've got it more controlled, you've got it more locked down, you're managing your driver defaults, for example, it might be the more bottom end. But typically, anywhere from 15 to 30, I think, is a bit of a given expectation for what I would say is a greenfield site. And that's purely a cost reduction that doesn't take into account those soft benefits of productivity enhancements.
Okay, do we have any more questions? No, doesn't look like we do. I'm sure if any do come up and people post them within the forums, we'll pass them on to you, Stuart. And I'd like to thank you today for joining us from PaperCut and everyone else for attending.
There's one just come in, actually, Chris.
Okie dokie.
Comment?
I'll see it, yes, if Sean can post it up. What sort of hardware is needed to implement?
Just a very good question. So we've got two primary options. We have an on-prem product, so PaperCut MF. Any of you that use the product will probably be most familiar with that. That's been a flagship product that's been 15, 20 years in the making. That is an on-prem product, so you need some form of server infrastructure to support that. However, a couple of years ago, we brought our native cloud solution to the market. So if you are that cloud first, cloud only, or you're making that transition to cloud and you're looking at infrastructure removal, you want to remove servers, print servers, we can actually work both ways as well. So again, there is, if you're on-prem and you're server driven, yes, we've got the solution. But if you're not and you're looking to remove those servers and you're happy to go cloud, you can have that infrastructure free solution as well.
Brilliant. Any more questions? No, I think that's it for today then. Okay, Stuart, I'd like to thank you and PaperCut for joining us today and all of you for attending.